just told the audience that Tim Davie resigned. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. So yes, breaking news tonight. Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC, has announced his resignation this evening amid allegations of bias at the corporation. It is understood in a statement. Davie says, "There have been some mistakes made, and as Director General, I have to take ultimate responsibility." The move comes following a torrid week for Britain's national broadcaster after it was accused of airing a doctored clip of a speech by President Trump and failing in its coverage of Gaza and trans issues. Deborah Turnus, the broadcaster's CEO of News, has also resigned. Well, first of all, we are going to be joined by the Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters, Fiona McAnena. Fiona, welcome to the show. This is breaking news. You were already booked in to talk about part of the reason why Tim Davie has now resigned. First of all, what are your initial thoughts on this?
Well, it's inevitable he had to go, didn't he? Because the failings are shocking. But if he calls that some mistakes, I'm afraid he's still gaslighting us and trying to pretend that what happened didn't happen. It's a catalogue of errors. And more importantly, it's gone on for over 10 years. You know, the Trump issue is the headline, but as we'll discuss, the transgender misrepresentation is probably the most egregious because they have been promoting an ideology that makes children unhappy. They've misrepresented puberty blockers as being harmless and just a pause button, and I could go on. So this had to happen, but is it enough? Because, you know, and again, these people who've resigned, they are not the ones who wrote the pregnant people script that Martine Croxall famously had to change. So this is the beginning, but it's very far from a solution to the problem.
Well, absolutely. So look, let's talk about this ideological capture. And as you say, I don't believe either, frankly, that it is, you know, some instances, some occasions here. The rot arguably goes much deeper. So you say it started about 10 years ago. What kind of examples could you bring to the...
Yeah.
Big tech has turned your phone into a surveillance device, harvesting your data, tracking your location, and selling your information to corporations. Unplugged built the upphone to fight back. It's the only smartphone with hardware-level privacy protection, completely blocking data harvesting at the source. It features a physical kill switch that cuts power instantly when you want to go dark, giving you control big tech took away. Unplugged puts privacy and sovereignty first. The upphone is built to British standards, designed to keep your data in your hands with independent servers, its own app center, and no corporate gatekeepers. You can access what you choose. No censorship, no app bans, just freedom. Everyone else is playing by big tech's rules. Unplugged rewrote them. The upphone runs on an operating system with 0 backdoors and a firewall that blocks thousands of tracking attempts every single day. The upphone includes a host of unique security features. The device can be set to have its memory wiped regularly, and if someone demands your PIN code, well, you can give them a false PIN that will wipe the device. It's called emergency reset. Privacy isn't a feature with Unplugged, it is the foundation. To get yours today, click the link in the description now.
There are two examples that I think are worth just dwelling on because they represent the most harmful aspect of this, which is, you know, preying on the vulnerabilities of children. So the I Am Leo video documentary was made for Children's BBC, and it showed a girl who believed herself to be a boy and was put on I believe was put on a full medical pathway by the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic. The director of that clinic, Polly Carmichael, was on the show, and she was talking gently about how puberty blockers were just a pause button, and there was a little graphic on the screen to show the pause button, and it all sounded very lovely and very benign. But if that young person went on that pathway, it's almost certain she then would have gone to cross-sex hormones, which would make her infertile. She would lose her sexual function. She would be sterile. She would have no ability to feel sexual pleasure. That is so far from benign. So that's one example, and that film went out 11 years ago. And as I say, it was aimed at children. That's hard to forgive, and it's not just a mistake. And then the other example I would give you is the infamous 100 Genders film. Now, that was educational content from the BBC. And you remember that there's a teacher who talks to children and they ask her questions like, what is the difference between sex and gender? And she explains that people can have one thing in their mind and another thing in their body. And she says, well, in fact, it's a very exciting question because nowadays there are over 100 genders. Now, that is BBC educational content.
That's for primary school children, right?
But primary school children were in the film, and many people complained about that, and I was one of them, and I pursued a correspondence all the way to the bitter end, and was told in writing by the Director of Complaints at the BBC that teachers and children shouldn't really take this stuff literally.
Yeah, I mean,
I said to him, well, what use is educational content from the BBC if it can't be relied on, if it's not true? And actually, as an admission, I find it pretty shocking, because what does that mean? You can't rely on anything they say? So the educational content for the BBC, by the way, is not regulated by Ofcom. For some reason, they seem to regulate their own content. So that was the end of the road for the 100 Genders film. It was eventually withdrawn. But who knows how much harm it had already done. And those are just two examples. That film was first put out 6 years ago.
And wasn't it that when that film was withdrawn because people, you know, the outcry from people pointing this out, that even then, I believe some institutions, I think Stonewall, seem to remember anyway, was very much complaining that this film had been withdrawn, even though it was just an outright example of dangerous ideological capture being taught to primary school age children. So I think part of the problem is what you were saying there is the Director of Complaints. I've complained to the BBC. This is it's supposedly our institution. We pay for it, and again, you have to see this stuff through, and they will just constantly mark their own homework. So part of the problem seems to be not just this ideological capture, but then the actual sort of shielding of it by the executives. And I believe there's also in this report that came out from the Telegraph this week. Can we talk about the Pride Network or the LGBTQ plus committee or whatever it was that basically any time you were going to write a story or make a story on this stuff, it had to go through them, right?
Well, that's what they asked for. So what we do know is that there's an LGBT staff network that has a great deal of influence. And one of the things that happens when a journalist tries to write anything negative about transgender issues is they'll get complaints against them from their own colleagues from that staff network. So that's one thing. Another thing is that there has been this LGBT and identity desk. So there's a little team, and they were the people who had the kind of control over stories. So anything, for example, something like puberty blockers, the CAS review or the WPATH files, you might think of those as being health stories. But no, they were funneled to the LGBT and identity desk, who then decided whether to report them and how to report them. And so the problem isn't just the promotion of bad ideas and harmful ideas, it's also that really important information never reached people. And you know, even now you hear people say, well, if there really was a problem, if there were, you know, if it was true that puberty blockers are harmful, we'd have heard it on the BBC. If there really were male rapists in women's prisons, we'd have heard about it on the BBC. And that team, that journalist team, played an important role in making sure we did not hear about it on the BBC, and that's part of the problem. So the legacy of this is going to take a lot to unpick from the BBC.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Fiona McAnena from Sex Matters. We have got some breaking news for you. The White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who has simply said, shot chaser. There we go. So